At this point, I'll keep it 100 with you, man. Ultimately, I'm looking to find my birth parent to say what I need to say. And, if she's not accepting me, she can kick rocks. It's cool. I mean, I would love to have a relationship, but I'm not going to go anywhere that I ain't wanted. And for whatever reason, I don't know what my existence means to her. Like, that obviously doesn't mean much at all because she's felt the way that she's felt about me.
Who am I?
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 This is Who Am I, Really? A podcast about adoptees that have located and connected with their biological family members. I'm Damon Davis, and today you're going to meet Joe. He called me from New Jersey. Joe didn't want for anything in adoption, but he's never been very open speaking about his adoptee status either. He said his reunions are complex because his paternal side has embraced him connecting with them, but his maternal side has placed roadblocks in front of Joe's progress to try to meet his birth mother. Joe said he just wants to thank her for the life she gave him. This is Joe's journey. At the time we spoke, Joe's beloved wife was in the hospital. He said it was a rough time because they've been together for 3 decades and genuinely enjoy spending time together, so it was hard to see his life partner that way. Joe does not want to be identified. Joe is a pseudonym to protect his true identity. Joe said his childhood was good in adoption. In his life, his adoptive mom is his real mom. She's the woman who's always been there for him. Joe grew up in a rough city in New Jersey.
There's stuff happening like blocks away from me. We have stuff going on like any black city USA.
When I hear you say we have the same issues as any black city in America, my mind automatically goes to some of the negative portrayals that are in the media. Some violent crime, some drugs, and inequitable opportunity, lack of a good education, poor housing, unavailability of good food choices. Are these the kinds of things you're referring to?
Yes, sir.
Let me ask you about your family specifically. Tell me a little bit about your family growing up. Were you an only child? Did you have brothers and sisters? And how were your interactions with your mom and dad?
Well, I was the only child, hoping that I had a brother or wishing that I had a brother or sister or someone just to be here with me. But I can't recall exactly when I found out that I was adopted. It was somewhere in my recollection in between 7 and probably 10 years old that I found it out. And I don't quite recall exactly how the conversation arose. I think it started maybe with me asking why I don't look like my cousins. My cousins look like each other, but I don't look like nobody, pretty much. Well, my father, who raised me, he's from Jamaica. And, he's dark-skinned like me. I'm rather dark.
And you could just see that you didn't have family resemblance.
Yeah, I knew that. I really don't recall exactly what struck up the conversation. But once she explained to me that, exactly who I was and the dynamic, it didn't matter to me. I mean, you're mommy, like you're my mother. I'm happy to have you. So I'm happy. I wasn't lacking anything through my childhood. Actually, I was grateful,
How did that gratitude feel? What do you mean by that? You were grateful?
I mean, mommy was mommy. Like, she was the mommy that everybody like in the neighborhood liked. She was just, I don't know, mom was great. That's all I can tell you. She provided, so all my needs were met. I went to Catholic school and grammar school for a couple of years. Then she put me in I went to a regular public school, but seeing as she was a teacher, she knew the school in the part of town that had the best school in my city, that had the highest grades. So my mom, I caught the bus from the south to the west, and I went to that school in the West Ward that had the highest test scores in the city. like year after year. And,
So she was setting you up for the best opportunities possible, is what I'm hearing.
yeah. And in high school, I went to, you heard of Seton Hall University. I went to Seton Hall Prep. I went there for 2 years, and then I went to St. Benedict's Prep and graduated from there.
That's really cool. That's great to hear that amidst all of the challenge, your parents were really striving to push you forward. Now, I say
Oh,
parents, and you've spoken about your mom quite a bit. Tell me a little bit about your interactions with your dad.
well, that was a little tricky. We didn't, I guess you could say, bond early on, because like I excelled in sports, and he wasn't like a sports guy. I mean, I don't know, coming from Jamaica, well, he's not domestic sports. I think what he knew was soccer. I mean, as a little kid, you don't care what you do. You just, I mean, I live near a park down here. Park is a block away. Grass, playground, everything that a park, has space and opportunity. But Pop never really took me to the park. I could probably count on one hand the amount of times he took me to a park. I mean, I don't care if he would have taught me soccer or what he knew. It didn't matter. That's daddy. So whatever they teach you, they teach you.
Right.
So, I guess I kind of immersed myself in the sports, when I was young.
But you didn't necessarily bond, you don't feel like sports was one thing, but did you take up other interests together?
Uh, not really. One thing he did do is we went to ball games together here and there, to see like the Mets and the Yankees, you
Mm-hmm.
know.
Mm-hmm.
So, he did expose me to some of that. Like we did that as a family, mom, dad, and me. So, when I got older, like maybe in my teens, the Yankees used to play the Red Sox around my birthday. So he used to take me to those games and whatnot. And I can remember going with a lot of my godparents. I call them auntie and uncle.
Yep.
Everyone knew the dynamic of, you know, my mom's close friends knew my situation. I don't really talk about it, and anyone who doesn't know me, I don't just come out and share like
Mm-hmm.
right away. Like I really actually don't share with anybody. It's not anybody's business really, and I've always kept that close to the vest.
Yeah, I understand. Why do you think that is that you kept it close to the vest? Just curious. I'm not pressuring you. I'm
No,
just curious to know
I
what your
just
stance is.
I don't like people. Their mind goes somewhere different, different places when they hear that. I've gotten everything. Oh, I'm so sorry. I've gotten a little bit of everything. When I have described that to some people, they're automatically, oh, I'm so sorry, and this, and this. I just don't want to be judged. So meet me on even terms, like as a human being, not a set of circumstances.
That's a really good point. You're absolutely right. People will take something intimate that they've learned about you and begin to see you through that lens with everything. And it can be an unfair prejudgment that you don't deserve, right? Just because they've
Uh,
got some intimate detail that could matter very much or might not matter at all.
yeah, agreed.
Joe commuted across town to a part of town where the school systems were better than near his home. That part of town had a lot of Indian, Brazilian, black, and white people. It was a melting pot of the global population. Joe stayed out of trouble and tried to make the best of an adoption situation that he fairly well hid. He said some of his cousins grew up knowing he was adopted, and Joe said he didn't really look like them, so if anyone paid close enough attention, they might have suspected something. But Joe never said a word to anyone outside of his family. It sounded to me like Joe wasn't really struggling with his adoption, so I asked him what motivated him to search for his biological family connections. Later in his life, when Joe was a senior in high school, his mother was diagnosed with cancer. On Memorial Day of that year, she went into the hospital, and then she passed away in the middle of July. After her death, Joe continued a lifelong habit of reading through old documents in his house, a habit he had since he was a child. He found an adoption record with the name of the adoption agency he assumed he was, quote, brokered through, to use his terminology. Joe was born in New York, a state with closed adoption records at the time of his decision to start searching. However, he was able to get access to his non-identifying information. I asked Joe what he learned from gaining access to his non-identifying information.
Well, I have two versions of it. Ultimately, whoever I guess works for the agency at the time compiles the information, and they give me their version of all of the information they have. They give me their version of it. So they were kind of vague with it a little bit back when I did that in '94. You try to find things that you have in common. Like what did the person look like? I found out that my birth mother was a dark skinned complexion like me. I found out she had hay fever, which I developed in high school. And it's the severe hay fever was the one thing that I guess you could say I held on to, that I could say, like, there's somebody else out there that I share this with because of a relationship. You try to find, who do I look like? Who am I like what type of things do I have that's like possibly a brother, a sister, or parents or whatever. That was the one thing that I held on to for years. Like, wow, my birth mother had hay fever like me, and I just, I grabbed that as the thing.
Joe learned that at the time of his placement, his birth mother was 18 and his birth father was 17. After the agency shared all they could about Joe, they told him about the New York State Adoption Reunion Registry, where he could register to be reunited with his birth family. If Joe's birth family had also registered to find Joe, then he would be reunited with them. Joe never applied to the state reunion registry. The letter with non-identifying information had been like gold to him, representing his family, even though the details were scarce about who they were.
Now, over the last a few years, I decided to apply to the registry, and I actually had the paperwork filled out, and I had to get it notarized. I had that done years ago, but I never actually mailed it in. And then it had expired. So I just recently got it notarized last week. I was trying to get it notarized before I talked to you, but they made it harder to get a notary public. I found out that banks are supposed to do it for free. If you have an account there, most of them have notary publics.
Yeah.
And that's where I had it notarized a couple of years ago. But I never just got the envelope and sent it off. I just never did.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, follow through.
Yeah. You got it done, got it notarized, and then it just sat there, and you never really completed the process. So it expired, and you had to do it again recently.
Yep.
Wow.
That's exactly what happens.
Why do you think you didn't mail it in previously?
Well, I mean, like I said, I didn't want for anything in my lifetime, and that was in '94. I've been with my wife since '93. I don't know. Life was good. Life was great. I wound up meeting the person that I was going to be with, and I was pretty happy. That was something that was kind of important to me, but I guess the difficulty making some type of connection, just I didn't know that it would wind up like that. I thought maybe I could go through a back door or something and find out some type of information or that would help me. I thought I could find it rather easily, like when I found that envelope. And I didn't understand the dynamic of everything, the closed adoptions, the open adoptions, and things like that. So I just, I was living my best life at the time. I was okay.
Yeah. That's what I'm hearing. It sounds like, despite the loss of your mom, you had a great life as a family growing up, and you didn't want for anything. You've said that more than once. And then you found your wife. You're still not wanting for anything, right? You found a companion that you want to hang out with. You've told me, that you actually like hanging out with her, and that this is, it sounds like life was good, and you didn't have a need to go find this information. And sometimes that's why it languishes, is because it's not satisfying anything for you to continue down this path, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, in the back of my mind, I still wanted to know, but it wasn't I guess you could say in the forefront. It wasn't eating at me. There were certain things that I guess, you naturally want to know, but I just never followed through with it. I procrastinated on it. And then, like I said, I renewed my interest in it maybe a few years ago.
Growing up, Joe had a friend. We'll call him T. T had a rough life growing up. His mother was hustling in the streets, and T admitted to Joe that he didn't think the person everyone said was his dad was really his father. Later in life, Joe and T reconnected after going separate ways. T had a family, and his wife and daughter had done DNA tests. Their tests revealed some family relationships T's daughter wasn't familiar with, so T was forced to think about doing a DNA test himself.
Him and I are actually the type of people that giving our DNA up, conspiracy theorists. We grew up in the 70s, man. I ain't just giving my DNA up. Like, that's something that's intimately, like, they could put you at the scene of a crime. Someone got your DNA, There's all kind of things involved with it that just doesn't seem like what makes you you. You don't just want to give it up like as easy as they say.
But eventually, T did submit a DNA sample, and lo and behold, Joe's old friend found his birth father. Joe said T and his birth father had a great connection and a happy reunion for the 4 years they knew each other before T's birth father passed away. Joe said that T's bravery to submit his DNA gave him the strength to submit a DNA test too. T's reunion story had ended with positivity, and T wished the same for Joe. Joe bought a DNA test when it went on sale, but he waited to submit the sample for months as he gathered the strength to send his DNA away for analysis. When his results came back, Joe was able to find his birth mother's and his birth father's family online.
Well, I have found that birth mother, but it's a crazy dynamic there. I didn't find her on Ancestry, but I found her family on Ancestry. I found parts of my birth mother and birth father on Ancestry. So the dynamic between my birth father, his family, like we're great. Like I've met cousins that I have that grew up in Bushwick and Bedford-Stuyvesant, New York, and Brooklyn, and that's where my family is from. They're like, I guess you could say, 2 generations removed of a place called Nevis Island in the Caribbean. Like, Nevis Island is one of 2 islands that are in the smallest country in the world. It's the Republic of Saint Kitts and Nevis. And they were part of the British West Indies, sugarcane and all those things down in those Caribbean islands. But they lived in a Caribbean neighborhood in Brooklyn.
Funny story, I got married in Nevis.
Really?
Yeah, sure did.
Oh,
isn't that crazy?
wow. Yeah. And I also found out that my grandfather's father had something like 32 kids. I guess he was about it. I don't know what to say. That side of my family, they procreate, bro. So Nevis only has something like 12,000 people or something like that on it. And I think to myself, how many of those folks are related to me? I mean, I gotta have a high percentage of folks in that country that have DNA that I share.
Joe's birth father died in the 1990s, so he never met the man. However, he was able to meet his paternal connections 3 years ago. Joe has some wonderful female cousins that he talks to weekly, and their reunion has been positive. But the dynamic on his maternal side of the family is a little more challenging. Joe's maternal family and paternal families kind of know one another. His paternal aunt was friends with one of his maternal aunts, and they hung out in some of the same circles. Their families went to the same church in the Bushwick section of New York City.
When I first got on Ancestry, the hit I got was my birth father's oldest brother. I also met a first cousin who was over here, the next town over. Mm-hmm. Those are the 2 people from each side that I share the most DNA with, that I got in touch with immediately once I got the hit. And when I spoke to my uncle, he was almost like a parent type big brother. He wasn't like a big brother that you would think of. One thing I found about my birth father is that he was in the streets and he was big in martial arts. He was nice with his hands. He was one of them cats you didn't want to screw with. And everybody in this Brooklyn neighborhood knew it. You just stayed out of his way pretty much. He went to Vietnam and he had to locate the Viet Cong and smoke them out and kill them. He was doing some crazy stuff over in Vietnam, from my understanding. That's probably what led to his drug use and stuff.
Yeah. Well, digging in on the trickiness of Joe's maternal side, He said one of his maternal uncles was younger than him by 17 years, his birth mother's baby brother. When they connected, they figured out that Joe's birth mother had to be one of his aunts, and they were correct. Joe got close to one of his cousins, but that cousin didn't feel it was his place to share the family information, so he kept Joe in the dark out of respect for the family sharing their information when they were ready. Joe said he understands why his cousin was being protective.
I didn't want him to do anything that would have him in trouble, I guess, with his family, because when you're the buried secret, you know, that no one knows about, you don't want to infiltrate somebody else's life. The one thing I wanted to do, and I still want to do, is to thank this lady for life. You know, I mean, it was God's plan for me to be where I was. I know that. I mean, that's the way it was supposed to go on. But, you know, they had back alley abortions and all kind of things going on, you know, when you're young. And, you know, in the 60s, you know, it was something totally different than the way it is now. We have plenty of single parent households, like too many, if you ask me, but that's just the way that life played, you know, just in life in general in the U.S., you know, any big city USA.
Right.
It just became that way. My generation actually dropped the ball, you know, because it was, you know, not being married and getting pregnant and stuff like that was not looked at too good years ago.
Right.
You know, and so I really just want to thank her for life and getting me here on earth and then giving me that chance by giving me up possibly, you know, at the age that you potentially were not ready for. So that's ultimately what I still want to do. I don't harbor any ill feelings towards her at all, like nothing. I mean, I want to know what it was like growing up in Brooklyn at that particular time. History has been one of my best subjects just in my life, and not knowing my own history has gotten to me a little bit. So, like, history tells you exactly why things are the way they are now. Like, this is what happened before what you know to be true now. Like, history is what tells you why it is what it is, and it's just so relevant on the here and now. I've always been curious about history, and you know, not knowing my history, I guess it does get to you at times, but that's not the end all be all. Just in my life, it hadn't been, because I was raised so good with great parents. So I ultimately want to meet this lady.
Joe said his birth father was made aware of his birth mother's pregnancy with him. It's his understanding that his birth father heard the news and basically ran the other direction. The other challenge is Joe's birth mother's husband did not know she had a child before their marriage.
The challenging part is I don't want to infiltrate somebody else's family. You know, the few things that I do know is that my birth aunt actually went to school with the person that my birth mother wound up marrying. And she knows that he doesn't know that she had a child. She actually disappeared and I was born in Staten Island. You know,
so she was sent away?
Yeah, she was sent away. I found out, like, I got some more non-identifying information later on, because I got another more detailed version of that later on. When I sought out the adoption agency again, there's another adoption agency taking care of my records now, because the one that I was adopted through is no longer in existence. So I got another version. The people were way more in depth than the first person that compiled the information, you know, so I found out a little bit more.
Got it. So let me ask you, where are you now with things, Joe? You've got two sets of information that are non-identifying, but you've identified the family members. You have not met your biological father. He's passed away, but you sound like you're cool with
like
family members. And you've got challenges trying to meet your biological mother, and as you've said, thank her for life. How are you doing right now? What's your how you feel?
Well, to this day, to me, the Holy Grail is meeting this lady, like, who I resided within for 9 months, you know, and got me here safely. So exactly where I'm at now, my aunt gave me enough information I tracked down her last known address, and I tracked down, phone numbers, names of other people. I found out that I have two half siblings that came after me. And, like I said, I found out that she married probably about 4 years after I was born to this guy. And unfortunately, he just recently passed away. So, and I do know, like I said, through my aunt, that this guy didn't know that she had a child beforehand. I don't know, how that would have been received in the late 60s,
Right.
that might have been looked at, 60s. I know they were real conservative. So, where I'm at now, my cousin that I met that lives over here in Jersey, her nephew keeps the information that he does know close to the vest. But he did try to share it with my birth sister, and originally he mentioned it to her, and she's been like dodging him, but she hasn't been receptive to the fact that I potentially exist. I was really excited when I first found out that I had siblings. I don't know. I immediately felt like, I guess you could say, a connection per se. Like I said to myself, I should have been the older brother to be able to help them get through life. Like I was supposed to be that dude, the big brother, like the person that has information for you guys, like on this world, this ball we call Earth, and just navigating life. That connection I felt like immediately in my head, but eventually he wouldn't. If he's found out information about something that she should be interested in or might want to know, he can't keep that to himself. So he's tried to explain to her that she has an older brother, and apparently she didn't know, or he's tried to like tell her this information. She's avoided him, and just not receptive. At this point, I'll keep it 100 with you, man. Ultimately, I'm looking to find my birth parent to say what I need to say. And, if she's not accepting me, she can kick rocks. It's cool. I mean, I would love to have a relationship, but I'm not going to go anywhere that I ain't wanted. And for whatever reason, I don't know what my existence means to her. Like, that obviously doesn't mean much at all, because she's felt the way that she's felt about me. So,
Well, let me pause you right there, because I think it's probably really easy to assume how she feels about you, but you've never actually talked to her, right?
Nah,
So,
like what I did was I did write, like I had to write this because it came straight from my heart onto the paper. Like I didn't want to type it. Like I wrote this out, 5 pages worth of letters of my experience and my trying to find my real parents. So I wrote like a 5-page letter that I wanted him to forward to her. But his last correspondence with her, he was trying to talk to her and prepare her for the letter, but the conversation didn't end that well. When she sort of, I skeptical about this whole thing. The pushback that I got was mainly from this sister and this uncle that I have that's 6 years older than me, which is his father. Like, so, his reasoning to him, he said, my sister wasn't pregnant when I was little. I know that. This current version of information ultimately explains that her family was aware that she was pregnant, all but her younger brother. It literally says those words in this non-identified information, like this current version that I got. And it said that he wasn't made aware of that she was having a baby. Yeah. And it also states that she went away to have the baby for like a certain amount of time. Had baby, and then you pop up and you're virtually the same size that you were, and no one's none the wiser.
Joe indicated that he understood his maternal uncle's skepticism in this situation. Joe said if someone showed up out of the blue with a bunch of information about his family after doing Ancestry DNA and they randomly found one another, he would probably be cautious too. Unfortunately, Joe's maternal uncle remains in denial.
He denies me too. He doesn't even want to speak to me. Reaching that roadblock, keeping it 100, he can kick rocks too.
Yeah.
I'm willing to talk if he's ever willing to talk, or if he wants to see the information. I make sure, like, my cousin treats me like a cousin. Like, really, he knows that we're cousins, and he's accepted me with open arms. DNA doesn't lie. So
Right.
he's made me feel super comfortable, but I understand the situation that he's in too. And he says that he does feel comfortable giving me like information about her, but I never really had to ask him. I got this information from my birth father's older sister. She gave me all of the tools that I needed to find what I needed to find. Like, I got roadblocks from my birth uncle. He's never wanted to even communicate with me. I know how I would feel if someone came to me like, who is this cat that knows all this information about my family? I need to meet this guy. I have an interest in that. I know I wouldn't moonwalk away from that. I would just, I want to know who this cat is that got all this info on my family, intimate details,
Right.
like what's going on here. Like, I wouldn't just write him off like he was nothing. So I guess you could say I feel some kind of way about him and about my birth sister. To me, that's strange that you would just write me off without hearing more of the story or wanting to know more of the story.
Right.
The fact that my birth sister doesn't want to hear anything else about it, that bothers me, because I wrote that 5-page letter that may help her to understand my journey. I mean, I don't know, people can't walk in my shoes. You can't know how another person feels, but you might have an idea. To me, I don't know. I guess I kind of feel like I don't mean that much to them to be concerned with my journey, at all, or to see if there's a possibility that there's any truth to what's going on.
Yeah.
And
that's right. And they haven't known you, and they may not really care. You know what I'm saying? This is kind of the challenge that we have as adoptees, is that people haven't known us. We've come sort of, quote unquote, out of the woodwork. And it can be really challenging to think, hey, like, I'm a person and you should take just 5 more minutes to get to know me just a little bit more before you just say, I'm out. I don't need this relationship. You know what I mean? And that's a really tough thing that we have to deal with. So I'm sensitive to that.
Yeah. Another thing that had me, DMC from Run DMC, he has an adoption story that's out there.
Yeah, I would love to chat with him.
Oh man, I heard that, and actually he was born in Staten Island also. But and when I heard his story, I was close to the age that he was when I first heard his story. That might have been something else that contributed to me wanting to know more at some point. When I heard that story, that connection there.
That makes sense.
You hear the soft, fluffy, good version of reunion stories, but then there, I'm living the darker side of that. That's all.
Yeah, that's right. I hear you. Well, Joe, listen, man, this has been wonderful to talk to you. I appreciate you opening up, because you've said you're not a person who speaks about your adoption very openly. So to come forward and share some of your own pain and struggle is valuable, not just, to the adoption community, but to other guys specifically, because there's not a lot of men who come forward and share their stories either. So I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you so much for being here with me, man. I appreciate it.
I think I heard you, like, I didn't know this whole format existed, like the podcast and everything, because I don't have an iPhone, so I don't get the Apple Podcasts. And my wife and I, we're not on social media, Facebook or Instagram, so we didn't know about this, right? I ultimately found out about your podcast, and you being a black male adoptee, my understanding was that, it's not a lot of us. Actually, I listened to a couple of podcasts that's out there, and it's majority women, and black male. Like, we just, I don't know. I haven't heard us represented too much out there. I felt like I wanted to share my story with the world,
And with somebody who can relate, is what it sounds like you're saying too. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you doing it, man. I really do.
Oh, no problem, no problem. I mean, there's healing involved for all parties.
Excellent. Well, listen, man, I wish you all the best. I know you're going through a big something with your wife. I wish you and your family the best for her recovery, and I appreciate you being here, Joe. Take care, man, okay?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Davis. I appreciate that.
My pleasure, man. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Hey, it's me. Joe said he didn't want for anything in adoption, and I love to hear that for adoptees. He shared that he didn't look like his family, but he felt love for his mom and dad, who propelled his academic success by making sure he attended great schools. But Joe struggles with the complexity of his maternal reunion. His birth mother and father's families sorta know one another, but Joe has roadblocks in front of him placed by his maternal relatives who don't want to talk with him and won't give him access to his birth mother. Joe said he's going to pursue the connection through the New York State Adoption Reunion Registry to see if his birth mother ever tried to connect with him through that channel. He reminded me that her husband is deceased, so if she was avoiding contact with Joe because of what her husband might have thought, that barrier has been removed. I was really glad that Joe reached out to me to chat man to man about his journey, and it meant a lot that he chose this platform to help share his story with the world. For anyone else out there listening who would like to be anonymized or de-identified, but you would like to share your story, please visit whoamireallypodcast.com/share. I'm happy to change your name, change locations, and details about your story,
and even alter how your voice sounds
if it will help you to share your adoptee voice with the world.